does. It's kind of one of those, like, the stars are aligning type of thing.
All right, so let's just level set here. We're going to be talking about essentially bouncing back from setbacks. Primarily when this is the don't do 2 days in a row thing, right? Where we've got a plan, we've got our non-negotiables, we've got our habits and our routines, and we hit it today, we miss it tomorrow. How do we prevent from missing it again? Or if we do miss it again, how do we find it again? That's the topic, right?
That is the topic, yeah.
All right, and welcome to episode 11 of the Reclaiming Man podcast. I am your host, Scott Sylvie, and with me today and always, Preston the Southern Canuck Radomski.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And the mastermind himself, Michael Beckwith. How are you guys?
Doing good.
We are a handful of episodes away from, basically becoming podcast royalty.
Yeah, 90th percentile.
Yeah, we hit that 13th episode, and 90% of podcasts never get that far, so hats off to us. Well, let's not count our chickens, I guess, but soon to be hats off to us.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it's so interesting to me that our topic tonight, kind of on a broad scale, bouncing back from setbacks, we're talking about this as we're approaching that elusive 13th episode. I'm not saying we're on the verge of not completing the 13th episode, but like as that episode approaches, I understand why podcasts don't make it past 13 episodes, because you got to do this every week.
Mm-hmm.
You got to edit it. You got to come up with ideas and
press the record button.
Press the record button. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not that it's hard. It's just,
how's that nipple feeling?
Commitment. Can you hear me scratching it or what?
I can see it too.
Just teasing the audience a little bit.
Yes,
Friday.
Because all of the men out there.
Yes.
Definitely your target audience, Fresh.
I know. Too funny.
All right. So Preston kind of spoiled the monologue. There's no monologue today. But he did announce our topic. Well, you announced our topic.
That's true, yeah.
I was going to casually come in and be like, what do you guys think we should talk about today? I don't know. How about this? Oh, that's a great idea. I don't know if that's what I was going to do.
Make it feel really organic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're making great content for the intro, at least right now.
Thank you. And also, I think we've just come a long way from episode 1 where we were reading script.
trying to script everything.
I was going to say, my name is, it's Michael.
I know. Can you believe we're like scripting that first one out? Like, because
we're
like trying to like casually read while not sounding like we're reading, while like being aware that we're on camera.
Awkward. Yeah. As opposed to just the three of us hanging out and bullshitting for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I guess it'll still be a good one to like direct people back to when we are training folks to be podcasters.
Well,
hey, listen to our first episode.
Hey, we bounced back from setback. Episode 1 was a setback.
Yeah.
We bounced back, motherfuckers.
The first 3 takes of episode 1 were all setbacks, yeah.
The second take was
done.
The second take. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Bouncing back from setbacks, Scott.
Yes.
Like, do you want to?
Yeah, so over the course of the last week, we've been swapping a lot of polos. If you haven't heard, we use this app called Marco Polo. Just kidding, we bring it up. Maybe this is your first ever episode. So Marco Polo is an app we use to communicate throughout the week with one another, just check in on a daily basis, multiple times, usually a day. And one of the things that I raised as a discussion point, not for the podcast, but for my life, because believe it or not, outside of the 30 to 45 minutes y'all are with us per week, there are other minutes and we have lives in them. And in my life, I've been dealing with, I would say in the aggregate, since I came off of 75 Hard, which was a seminal concluding chapter of this process for me, of just self-improvement, I'm in a much better spot than I was at the end of January when I concluded it. But I would also say there have been several setbacks, meaning I could be further along than I am. But at the same time, I'm still progressing. And so one of the challenges I had with 75 Hard was the fixed mindset of you either succeed or you don't, where over the last, it's been 90 days, maybe a little less than 90 since I concluded that, I still made good progress in most areas of my life, but not all areas. And so coming into this week, this has been I wouldn't say a theme, but it's something I brought up a couple of times over the last few months where I've just been feeling a little overwhelmed. And there's a great podcast by Rob Dyrdek. Shout out to Rob. Anytime you want to be a guest on our show, just let us know. He's got a great podcast about,
Yeah, he does.
well, he's got a great podcast,
Mm-hmm.
period. But one of the episodes, a couple of the episodes I really liked are his episode where he discusses systems, and then the episode where he discusses the feeling of overwhelmed and exceeding your capacity. And I've felt that a lot, especially this last week, couple weeks. I've been really busy. Business is booming and it's great. And I'm starting a new one as well and traveling a lot. And then at the same time, a few weeks ago, I started back on an even more restrictive, like no inflammation. It's not diet, changing my relationship with food and not eat inflammatory foods like sugar primarily, but grains and dairy and others. So I've been going through a big change with my health system, and then also a lot of changes in my kind of first tier financial systems as well. So there's been a lot of change, and I've been overwhelmed. Also, my parents just moved here, which is absolutely amazing. But that good stress is still stress, right? And good change is still change. So I've been feeling overwhelmed, and I've been trying to work through how to resolve that. And the discussions in our polos led, I think it was Michael or maybe Preston, to say this would be a great discussion for a podcast, and that's why we're here.
Absolutely, yeah. We've all experienced setback, whether it's one day or when we started this group chat on Polo back in December, we were cold plunging and you guys had gotten me on fire and I had this goal for the year and all these plans that I was going to do all these things. And then as January turned into February, the what is it called? Ryan Mickler, the natural man. Like we all have this like natural man in us that wants to just sit on the couch, not do my reading today. I can run tomorrow. This inner kind of guy that just doesn't want to do anything. And I've even felt that take over me in the last few months to where I'm like you'd mentioned, Scott, with your 75 hard ending there and now being about 90 days out from there and not progressing to where you would like to be. I think, gosh, if I had done from January 1st till now, religiously ran every day, eaten clean, I'd be, where would I be? And I mean, that's easier said than done. We all, like you mentioned, have our stresses in our lives, good and bad, and life just happens. And how do we make it so that when we have a setback, instead of compounding that into more setbacks, stopping it dead in its tracks and slowly compounding that back into success? And I mean, right now, my only answer is that you guys, we just have to hold each other accountable. That's one of the main solutions in my mind.
Oh, absolutely. I think you just touched on it a little bit. I would disagree a little bit with what you said about how over the past few months it's taken over that natural man that you were talking about. I don't think it's taken over by any means, any of us, but it certainly has reared its head. And whether it's our natural man or our previous identity, however you want to call it, we have that duality in us that it's the tension between who we were for the last 5 years or 10 years or our entire life to this point, and then where we know we want to be and the identity that we want. And there will always be some degree of challenge. And the longer that we persist with good habits and making the right decisions and having the right thoughts, the easier theoretically it becomes because it's more habitual. But it doesn't change the fact that it still is uncomfortable to go through these changes. And that's what the conversation that we were having on Polo was. When we recognize you're starting to stumble or slip for a day, how do you slow that down and not let it become a face plant and fall on your face and turn into 2 days or 5 days or a week of regression? And to Scott's point, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. And over the past few months, we were having these conversations in polo on and off, and I just started to realize, like, oh, we're all individually, we're being really successful in certain areas. It's hard to do it in every area.
Mhm.
And go ahead,
And
Scott.
on that note, it's not only it's an interesting side effect of making the decision to become better in your life. It's much easier to say, I'm going to focus more on my career, or I'm going to invest in my relationships, or I'm going to hit the gym every day and eat well. But as soon as you start making that kind of flicking that switch to say, I'm going to just become a better human, a better man, and it crosses all of these different vectors and areas of our lives, makes the effort, there's like an order of magnitude of increased effort when you go from, I'm going to get better at this one area of my life to I'm going to be better at life. Because now you've got financial systems, you've got health systems, you've got relationship systems, and you've got career systems, and all these things. I call them systems, but there are all these areas of life that you're trying to improve and you're trying to get better habits around. And that's where at times I can feel like I'm being stretched too thin as a result of trying to over index on everything. Sometimes means that I'm under indexing on everything.
Yeah, and I think you touched on at least part of the answer there when you talked about systems. And the question that we wanted to discuss was, what is the catalyst, or what is the trigger or action or thought that helps you stop continuing to regress? Because if you wake up one day a half an hour late, not a big deal for the whole week. But if all of a sudden that half an hour becomes 45 minutes, becomes an hour, and it progressively gets worse, right? It's compounding against you. All of a sudden you're losing not 30 minutes, but you're losing 4 hours in
Hmm.
a week. And those 4 hours or 5 hours, whatever it becomes, maybe less, they have a dramatic impact on how you feel about yourself and how you feel
Well,
about
you're
what
not
you're
keeping the
accomplishing.
promises you made, right?
Hmm.
And I think for me, it's you can't you can't change what you're not measuring.
Yeah.
And so if you stop measuring what it means to be disciplined, I know I don't know if I've said this on the show yet, but my wife, who, like, if we lived in Norse times, would be like a badass shield maiden, like she's a killer. She's got a saying that you can't dabble in discipline. Like, you're either disciplined or you're not. There's no I'm going to be disciplined today and not tomorrow. And when it comes to when we might have setbacks, at least for me, it's when I'm losing my discipline. Well, I'm losing my discipline because I'm getting lax at writing down what I'm going to do. What are my goals for today? What am I hoping to accomplish? When I have these systems, if it's a health system, what am I committing to? And if I don't have clear, concrete commitments that I then go out and execute against, I still might be moving forward, but I'm not moving forward with the same purpose and intention. And so as a result, I start to slip, and those slips become slides. Hopefully not, but they may. And it's it happens almost silently. Like, I'm not even consciously aware of it.
Yeah. And
Wa-
we
Once
talked.
once I've made the decision,
Yeah.
consciously or otherwise, to not, like, this is literally where all of it lives, right? Is I use a notepad, and when I'm on point, you would come in here and you would see for tomorrow, already have 6 things on my list, broken out into my first 6 hour chunk and my second 6 hour chunk, and maybe even my third, because I've already thought through what a successful day tomorrow is going to look like. And of course, I leave room in there for potentially, at least, for things that come up. But generally speaking, when I'm on point, I can tell you how I'm going to spend my day tomorrow. And I haven't been doing that with nearly as much consistency. And so my time management has slipped. And then there's this, I'll get to time management maybe in a minute.
No, I just think that those things that you're mentioning there, those are great practical examples of what I was hoping to talk about exactly. So you're in this spot where you're starting to feel overwhelmed, which inherently means you don't have the energy mentally or physically in many cases to keep the promises that you made to yourself. Because you, instead of being in a position where you are creating the better version of yourself, you're in survival again. And so whether it's Joe Dispenza who's talked about this, or Jeff Olson in The Slight Edge,
Or Michael Beckwith.
or well, I mean, I talk about it because I've read it there, but certainly there is that spectrum from failure to survival to success that we all are, on a non-linear path. And as soon as you can recognize, okay, I'm in survival again, I'm feeling overwhelmed, you don't have the energy. And so that's where these systems that Scott you're talking about are so important, because if you have a system, it takes less energy because it's already been designed. You know that it's going to work provided you write down those six things that you're going to do the next day.
Let me give you, I suppose my checklist is a system. I was going to give another simple example of,
Sure.
when I was on 75 hard, my food system was, I used Freshie, which I think went out of business like the week after I was done. But
Really?
yeah,
That's crazy.
I got 10 meals a week delivered to my house. So lunches and dinners, 5 days a week were just, I didn't have to think about it. I just grabbed whatever one wasn't going to expire or was going to expire the soonest, and I'd pop it in. And a few times throughout the week, I'd eat meals with my family as well, which made up the other 4. And then breakfast was either eggs or it was yogurt and granola. And I flipped every other day. Right. So I didn't have to think about food ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every single day, that system was in place so that all the energy that I might have spent, which some days can seem like a lot or feel like a lot, to figure it out. And that's oftentimes without a system where you stand in the pantry and consume 400 calories of potato chips while you're looking for what you're going to eat. Right. And so if you don't have these disciplines or these systems, that's where slippage can occur and setbacks can occur. And it's more of a death by 1,000 cuts than it. I'm certainly, if there's massive chaos in your life, it can derail you. But for me, at least, the derailing that has occurred over the last 90 days has been more of a gradual series of small things that I haven't been as diligent on maintaining.
Yeah. And the part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation too was because I feel like there's a lot of people out there on social media who always speak about just being so consistent. And it's disingenuous if we continue to have these conversations and we're not talking
sure.
about the struggle of how to maintain it. And to your point, when you have it, it's the goal for me anyways was to talk about this so we could develop, the three of us, a system for getting back on track. And first is understanding and recognizing that it's happening, but you can't be doing that if you're not having the conversations that we've been having over the last several weeks, where we're like, hey, how's it been going with push-ups or cold plunges or your diet or exercise?
We don't want to feel guilt or shame or pain. And so I think it's very natural for people to shy away. And that's something I brought up as well, is in my case, when I finished 75 hard, I was about 265. I got back up to about 271. I'd kind of stayed right around that number. And then I went on 2 work trips back to back, a work trip for 5 days and then a family vacation for 6. When I got back from that, I was like 272. Now I'm down back to about 262. But I wasn't even talking about that because previously I'd been going 10, 12 pounds a month down every month for like 5 or 6 months, right? 5 months, I guess it was. And things were great. And then things stopped being great. So I kind of stopped talking about it. And it wasn't that I wasn't still doing things. I just wasn't, to Preston's point, I wasn't doing things with the same resolve and the same consistency. So I wasn't seeing the same results. And the reality is it's hard to be on point at all times for long stretches of time.
Or
And
forever. I mean, if the plan is to, though this is our new identity and our new life, it's just not always that easy. whether you get sick. We all both, like about
we
a
all
month ago,
got
we
sick.
all got sick.
And in January, when I got back from 75 hard, we were all wrecked.
Right. And that's not to say that's a good excuse to like
Right.
get off track. But I also think as we slowly would get off track, and we're learning as we go through this to keep each other accountable. And it's as much as we say, like, we need to call each other out on these things. Sometimes it's hard because I know we're both sick and I don't want to just be nagging at my butt. Hey, do
Right.
your fucking run or whatever it is. And we all know what we need to do. And when we have fallen a few steps down, I think for folks listening, the goal when you realize when you got that far down, the next day you don't have to go right back to where you were, say a month ago or 2 weeks ago. It took baby steps to get you down this far. It's like, let's
Mhm.
take some baby steps to work ourselves back up so that we build, like you mentioned, systems and writing down to-dos. That way you just more successful long term.
One of the key things that need to be done as part of so if we talk about the system around improvement, across the board improvement,
Yeah.
we need to be, as part of that system, there needs to be a consistent and dedicated evaluation of where you are, where you're going, etc. Like, you
Mhm.
need to be able to look back on a daily basis or a weekly basis or whatever the time frame that makes sense and say,
Yeah.
am I still on track? Am I still 1% better?
Well, and as you're saying that, I realized we should never start by looking back. We should always start by looking forward and thinking about, hey, what is that vision that I'm being drawn to, that I was originally drawn to? What is the
Mhm.
compelling vision of the future, whether it's your health or your wealth or these other areas? Think about that ideal state. And that should be the first thing that you think of and say, okay, I lost focus on this.
Mhm.
Place that firmly in your mind first as like the future. Where do I want to go? And then I think go into,
Right.
let's reflect on this a little bit and
Right.
see what brought us here, because
And
just
hopefully the
yeah.
answer to that is always yes, I'm killing it.
Yeah.
Right. But when you start looking at that across all the different segments of your life, it's really hard to be on your game in all areas.
For sure.
And so if there is a bit of an ebb and flow in things, right? Like, part of it is, and I don't know that I'm looking for a like daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly type of system. Maybe I am. But part of that is like, okay, so I've been indexing, as you all know, really hard at my business. So I started a new company last year. It's going very well. I'm starting a second one that augments or supports the first one, and they support each other. And so I'm going through a lot of just development and growth. I've done a lot of these things before, but operating maybe at a level I haven't and running two companies simultaneously. And so I'm over indexing. And if I were to look at that in a vacuum, I'd say, yeah, I'm making great progress. Like, the business is doing good, bank account looks good, like things are moving forward. But I can also say I've been under indexing on time with my wife. And part of that is because she's been really busy and disciplined and focused on creating systems for her life, which is sometimes shared with mine. But while I'm building companies, she's building lives for my
Building
kids
hum yeah.
and yeah, and educating them. So she's got her own systems, schedule, and ours don't always work well together. The timing doesn't always work. And so we've been kind of missing each other a bit. And so this is more stream of consciousness than prescriptive, but in my mind, I need to be not only looking at it at, say, through a weekly lens, but then also tracking. Okay, so if my relationship system isn't as on point, although my mom being here means we did get a date night. We did a dinner overlooking sunset at the lake by our house, which is pretty nice.
Like at a restaurant or just you went
No,
and parked like you did
no,
like an old school, like
yeah, we
parked and made
parked
out?
and no,
No.
we walked. We
Oh,
went
you
to
did the
No, we
naughty
went to
thing?
Tim. We went to Tim's Ford, which is a lake by our house, and just hiked down to the water and spread a blanket and ate our. What did we eat?
Not cheese.
No, it was not cheese. What did we eat? We had just chicken and fruit and veggies, like probably our standard. I don't remember this, but it was definitely those things. And then maybe she brought, yeah. So she's been making these homemade desserts. So they're sugar free. It'll be like dark chocolate with almond butter and then salt and then freezing it. Or she'll do dates. We've talked about that with dates. So yeah, we had a little healthy treat as well. But so I guess what I was getting at was I have to be able to evaluate not just the immediate lens, but also trends over time to ensure that I'm giving all of the areas of my life the minimum baseline. And it's not the minimum. I'm not saying I want to do the minimum with my kids. There's a minimum baseline of what I consider success. And I need to make sure that any of the areas of my life that slip below that for more than a very small, short amount of time needs to be remediated, it needs to be addressed. And so I think the system for me is just having these dedicated check-ins. And I think Ed Milet actually talks about this where some people do it every year, other people will do it every quarter, great people will do it every month, phenomenal people will do it every week, hyper phenomenal, whatever the next superlative is, will do it every day. And then there's people that do it every hour and they're world class. They're best, absolute best in class, where they're constantly checking in. They've got their North Star and are they still pointed at it? Yes or no? And for me, I don't want it to be maybe every hour right now. I don't think I'm operating at a level where that would be beneficial for me. But I do need to make sure that I'm checking in, like intentionally checking in with all of these systems and areas of my life to ensure that I'm not letting something just slip a little bit, but then have
Yeah.
that compound over time.
Yeah. And I think with our relationship as it's been growing these past few months, we've omitted saying certain things because we've started to make assumptions that, oh, well, we've been doing this, so I don't need to talk about this, or I don't need to mention this, or it's not been going as well, so I don't have something positive to say about it, so maybe I shouldn't say it. So sort of self-doubt type of, old identity, negative limiting thoughts coming through and starting to change how we interact. But over the past couple weeks, we have been asking those harder questions again. And so it's really helped me reframe my mindset towards that vision of the future and where I want to be. So the support system is a really important part of it as far as getting yourself back on track, having people that know what your goals are because you've already told them. They know what your vision is and they, based on what you're telling them, should be able to shoot straight with you and say, well, it doesn't sound like you've had as much success this week, or you haven't had as much. Are you pulling something up right now, Scott? Yeah. That's amazing. It's so true. It's definitely a non-linear journey
So
when it
let's
comes to life. Yeah.
for those people that don't watch this on YouTube, we should probably just
Yeah.
have lots of jokes that they won't get, right? That's a Mitch Hedberg. Mitch altogether. He does
Yeah.
during this joke, he points to the back. Oh, look at that shirt, man. What the hell? Anyway, for anyone listening, I pulled up a little screen share here. People think success is just a straight arrow up and to the right. But really what success looks like is I will draw. Oh, I was going to draw it and hold it up like it made any sense.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of being a straight line up and to the right, it's like a little bit up and to the right and then a whole bunch of squigglies all over the place and then eventually up and to the right. So yes, success is not linear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing the visual. That was helpful for everybody listening on Apple.
Yeah. I think just having this podcast out there in the world for people to find will be their aha moment to reset. How many podcasts have the three of us listened to that had that sort of similar effect with us? Yeah.
All right. So boys, here's what I'm going to challenge us to do. We need to develop a system for improvement and one that is self-correcting. So an autonomous system. Obviously, we have to be the ones doing the correcting, but the system itself should introduce those forcing functions whether this is reminders in our phone or calendar invites, I don't know. Like, we don't need to solve the system on this podcast. But my challenge for us is to implement a system, document that system, offer it as a giveaway for anyone who signs up for our newsletter on reclaimingman.com,
Right.
and then use that system.
Yeah.
And this is episode 11. So by episode 22, we should have another 11 episodes. We should have an update where we talk about our system and what impact it has had on our lives.
Yeah.
I like the challenge.
Challenge
Yes.
accepted.
Challenge accepted.
Do we have a challenge accepted?
Some sort of soundbite.
We
No,
need
we
one.
don't.
We don't.
Yeah.
Get on
We
that.
should get one.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted.
Interestingly enough, the time that we record these podcasts, we have it slated in the calendar as a weekly accountability meeting. And I think that's a part of it. So we'll have to continue to converse amongst ourselves, but I think that's part of it. And there's the daily component, there's a weekly component. Like you said, it's a different cadence depending on who you are, where you're at in the journey. But I agree that it's something we should help our listeners as well as ourselves by formalizing and taking some of the energy out of it, because it's the system component of it is
right.
What I love about that is we reduce the amount of inputs and increase the amount of output.
Well, what's so fascinating about this whole subject of setbacks is it actually does the opposite.
Yes.
Right. And it's not just, oh, I've got this 1 hour task I've got to do. And you stack up 5 of those 1 hour tasks and you're now 5 hours behind. No. You're not 5 hours behind. You're 6, 8, 10, 12, 16 hours behind. Because the mental drain of knowing that you're not keeping those promises to yourself, you're not maintaining your disciplines, you mentally start to check out in certain ways and your capacity gets lower. And so now what would have just been handled if you had just maintained your normal disciplines, instead of being a 5 hour drain, there's a multiplier.
Yeah.
And so it's a negative compounding effect.
Agreed.
And for me, at least, like, one of the big things I did this week is I was recognizing that I had some of these feelings of being over capacity. Was I went back to my discipline. All right, what is the one thing, the single most important thing that I should get done today? And I did it. And I felt fucking great when I got it done. And it took like an hour. I was like, all right, well, I immediately reached for my phone to look some stupid shit up. Who knows? And I immediately set it back down. Like, within a half second, I recognized what I was doing. I was like, no, what's the next most important thing?
And I mean, that's a really good point, because I think all of us do that.
On track. All right, so we are going to come back in the next less than 3 months. So this is like a 75-day challenge, because 11 episodes, 77 days. This is our 75
easy.
75 easy.
75
How big will these guns be in 75 days?
How big
I'm
will
not
my
really going for
beard
big
be?
guns, but
Yeah.
oh yeah, I see it coming back. Ooh.
It's coming.
Wow.
All right, so we've got 11 weeks to develop this. I'm sure we'll talk about the progress along the way, because doing things in isolation is not fun. It's much more interesting to share some of the progress as we go along. And
So
certainly
tune in next week to see
tune
when
in
we
next-
come up with
See you next week. Yeah, I think this was a great conversation. I'm excited about
I am too.
as
I'm
a systems guy.
So we haven't delivered the system yet, but hopefully this is triggering some good thoughts. And I know we haven't been really great at encouraging feedback and community quite yet. It's on the roadmap for having more conversations with the folks that we're talking to and directly here. And so if there are things that you think, hey, this would be a great idea to add to the system, please send it to us, either DM or Facebook group, whatever it may be. If you have my phone number, text it to me. I don't care.
Yeah.
Would love to include some of that type of feedback.
Yeah. All right. With that, episode 11 is wrapped. Find us online, reclaimingman.com. Join our newsletter. You'll get a free version of our system once we're done with it.
That's right.
once we build it.
Yes. Hey, if you got any great ideas, tell us your great ideas, and then we'll build a system, and we'll
Well,
And by the way, it'll be free for the first 30 days, but after that, a subscription.
man, one of the
$9.97 a month.
apps for
No kidding.
one of the apps for cameras. I don't remember which one it is, but it's an iPhone app for like professional photography. It was like $12 for a one-time download, and then they changed it to $2 a week.
What?
Yeah, it went
Wow.
from, and it wasn't like you were grandfathered in. Nope, you can now pay $2 a week.
Insane.
Anyway,
We won't do that
with
this
the
time.
content that you're giving us. Oh, Michael, you're inspiring lots of confidence.
They know I'm joking.
All right, gentlemen, we will see you
next Friday.